D.B. Cooper, the man who hijacked a plane and vanished.
On November 24th, 1971, a well-dressed man walked into Portland International Airport. He purchased a one-way ticket under the name Dan Cooper and quietly boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305, bound for Seattle. Nothing about him seemed unusual. He wore a dark business suit, a black tie, and carried only a briefcase. The flight attendants described him as calm, polite, and completely ordinary. But only minutes after takeoff, everything changed. Cooper handed a folded note to a flight attendant. At first, she assumed it was just another passenger trying to flirt. When she didn't read it immediately, Cooper leaned closer and calmly whispered, "Miss, you'd better read the note. I have a bomb." Inside his briefcase were objects that appeared to be an explosive device. Without raising his voice or causing panic, Cooper made a demand that would shock the entire nation. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck, waiting when the plane landed. Thus began one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. As Flight 305 continued towards Seattle, the flight attendant quietly informed the cockpit about Cooper's note. The captain immediately contacted air traffic control, and within minutes the FBI was listening. Cooper remained remarkably calm. He opened his briefcase just enough to convince the crew that his threat was real. Then, without raising his voice, he delivered his demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. To protect the passengers, the crew agreed to cooperate. Outside the aircraft, law enforcement officers rushed to gather the ransom while the planes circled above Seattle, buying precious time. No one on board knew whether the man calling himself Dan Cooper would keep his word, or what would happen when the plane finally landed. After landing in Seattle, Flight 305 remained surrounded by law enforcement and airport personnel. Cooper remained calm as negotiations began. Authorities rushed to collect the $200,000 ransom in $20 bills and gather 4 parachutes, exactly as requested. One by one, the passengers were safely released from the aircraft, unaware that they had just survived one of the most infamous hijackings in American history. But Cooper wasn't finished. After receiving the money and parachutes, he ordered the plane to refuel and prepare for takeoff once again. His destination remained unclear, and his next move would become the greatest mystery of them all. As Flight 305 prepared to leave Seattle, investigators realized they were no longer trying to stop a hijacking. They were about to witness an impossible escape. On the evening of November 24th, 1971, Flight 305 took off from Seattle for the second time. This time, only D.B. Cooper and a small flight crew remained on board. Cooper instructed the pilots to fly toward Mexico at a low altitude and slow speed. Outside, heavy rain and freezing winds covered the Pacific Northwest in darkness. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper ordered the crew into the cockpit and closed the cabin door behind them. At approximately 8:13 p.m., the aircraft suddenly experienced an unusual upward movement. Somewhere over the dense forest below, D.B. Cooper lowered the Boeing 727's rear staircase, strapped the ransom money to his body, and jumped into the stormy night. He was never seen again. No witnesses, no photographs, no goodbye. In a matter of seconds, D.B. Cooper became one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Did D.B. Cooper survive the jump, or did he disappear forever into the wilderness below? The largest manhunt in FBI history was only just beginning. Within hours of D.B. Cooper's disappearance, one of the largest manhunts in FBI history was underway. Hundreds of agents, local police officers, and military personnel were deployed across the Pacific Northwest. Search teams combed through dense forests, rivers, and rugged mountain terrain, hoping to find any trace of the mysterious hijacker. Helicopters scanned the wilderness from above, while investigators carefully analyzed the aircraft's flight path. Yet, despite an enormous search operation, there was no parachute, no body, and no sign of the missing ransom money. It was as if D.B. Cooper had simply vanished into thin air. With every passing day, the mystery only deepened, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. For more than 5 decades, investigators have pursued countless leads in an attempt to uncover D.B. Cooper's true identity. The FBI investigated over 1,000 suspects, but none could be conclusively linked to the hijacking. Among the most famous was Richard McCoy, a former Army helicopter pilot who carried out a remarkably similar skyjacking just months later. Another suspect, Kenneth Christiansen, had worked for the airline and possessed extensive knowledge of aircraft operations. Years later, Robert Rackstraw, a former military pilot with an extraordinary background, emerged as a leading theory among independent investigators. Yet, despite compelling stories and circumstantial evidence, every suspect left investigators with the same problem. There simply wasn't enough proof. The man known as D.B. Cooper remained unidentified, leaving one of the greatest mysteries in American criminal history unsolved. More than 50 years have passed since D.B. Cooper disappeared into the stormy skies over the Pacific Northwest. Advances in forensic science, DNA analysis, and modern investigative techniques have failed to reveal his true identity. In 1980, a young boy discovered a portion of the ransom, money buried along the banks of the Columbia River, raising even more questions about what really happened that night. Did Cooper survive the jump and live out the rest of his life in secret? Or did he perish somewhere in the vast wilderness below? No one knows. In 2016, after decades of investigation, the FBI officially suspended its active inquiry into the case. Yet, the legend of D.B. Cooper refuses to die. To this day, he remains the only unsolved skyjacker in American history, and one of the greatest mysteries ever to